my mask. He's running outside the office. See if he has an extra mask for me.
I'm supposed to stand with it.
But today,
Yes, sir. If you'd like, if you'd prefer to be seated, you come up here and sit with me and use one of the mics.
But I'll get it together by the end.
I still don't know.
Yes, sir. Help yourself.
God
Have a good rest of the day.
Okay, we are on live.
All right, we're ready. I'd like to call this special meeting to order today. I'm going to ask Commissioner Legg to lead us in our invocation, which will follow by our pledge of allegiance. So at this time, will all please stand?
Please stand. Father, we thank you for this another day. We thank you for the sunshine that you've given us today. We thank you for the progress of the project next door. We ask that you watch over us today as we have this meeting. We ask you, bless our police and fire departments and all our staff. Bless my brother in Kentucky who's got to have surgery in the morning. Watch over him. Never shall we give you praise. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Do I have a motion to approve our agenda for today, or is there anything? Have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
And all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Today we have a special presentation. It's with Mr. Hartwell Wright. He's Human Resources Consultant for the North Carolina League of Municipalities. So we do have with us today our attorney, Dan Hartzog, by way of Zoom. We can look at him, he can look at us, and our town clerk, Jane Starling. So Mr. Hartwell, Mr. Wright, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll, at this time, for your presentation.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and I bring you greetings from your League of Municipalities. And actually, I'm really happy to be able to get out. I'm so tired of being confined, I don't know what to do. If it's okay, I won't wear my mask while
It's okay.
I couldn't wear it, if that's okay. Thank you. Mayor, I am so happy to be here, not necessarily under these sets of circumstances, because I know this is going to create a little difficult time for you. But hopefully we can give you some insights into it today. One of the things, I'm going to probably need to start off by asking questions to find out where you are, where you're going before I get too deep into what I'm going to talk to you about, what I'm prepared to talk to you about. But in an introduction, Mayor, it's one of the disadvantages that staff have when you come and meet with our members is we don't know you personally. We don't know what you do professionally. We don't know, how long you've been in office and what you've been through in your careers. It's very conceivable that any of you could do a better job at this presentation than I'm doing, or will do, and will qualify. But I don't know that. And not knowing, I can't afford to assume that. So when I get into the presentation, it's pretty basic and bring everybody up at the same time. In fact, and I would just think that's what works best for all of us. As always, Mayor, when I come to meet with the member, I like to set a goal for myself, and I would like to do that today as well. And my goal would be that when I leave, I would have talked to you about a process that, first of all, you understand it, and secondly, you'll find it useful. And if I can qualify those two things, I will have done my job today. But as I always do, I like to start off by making you aware of what I refer to as the state of the state. In North Carolina, there are a little over 300 cities, towns, and villages that have a professional manager or administrator. All 100 counties have a professional manager. So a little over 400 managers providing local government services to the citizens of this entire state. It's not a lot. It's that's spread pretty thin. In the corporate world, that would be tough recruiting. And why does that matter? Why am I telling you that? Because I want you to understand as you begin this process, this next step in your venture here, that you're in pretty good company. Because I looked at the website for the manager's website yesterday, and there are 40 recruitments going on as we speak, both cities and counties. And of course, you know, some of those folks are recruiting at a level that you might not be recruiting at. But I can assure you, once you start this process, there are candidates that all of you would be going after. And so I think it's helpful for you to understand that, first of all, so that you know how important it is to do your recruitment process right. And secondly, to give it the importance that it deserves. I contend that this is the most important decision that this board will make during this term, barring some natural disaster coming through. Your manager is your absolute primary function is to get that person hired. Mayor, if you would, I provided a handout for you, and I'm going to go ahead and put you at ease right now. We're not going through this whole handout. It's only the first 6 pages we're going to talk a little bit about. And everything else that I provided is a reference or a sample that you could use or consider to use as you go through. And I've got a couple of rules that we have to go by. And the first rule I'd like to establish is, please let's let this be informal. Interrupt me anytime you have a question. Folks, I'm old, and if you don't do it, I'll forget it if you wait too late. Okay? And the second rule is, let's don't have any other rules. I would really like this to be an informal process where we can communicate with each other as we need to. I think we can all learn better that way. Okay? Yeah. The handout that I provided for you on page 2 talks about roles. And the North Carolina League of Municipalities is the first responsibility there. And that's why I'm here today. Our role is to assist you, to help you with your process. The league does not get involved with the selection of individual candidates at any level. We choose not to do that business. There are professional recruiting firms that do that. The primary reason is me. If we were to do that, and we recruited a manager for you, and that manager didn't work out really well, he would not be happy with us. Conversely, if we recruited that manager from another member town, that town would not be happy with us. We don't envision that process, that endeavor as being profitable for our membership. Our role is to assist our membership as best we can as they do the process. So, excuse me. Sorry. So, my role here simply today is to talk about process. Now, Mayor, I know that this is a work session and you're not going to do any business, but I will, excuse me, I would like to encourage and even challenge you that I think there are going to be 3 decisions that you need to make before you begin your process of recruiting for you. And number 1 is, as you conduct the process, who's going to do it? Is this board going to do this process itself? Or are you going to hire a consulting firm to help you do your recruitment? Are you going to break up any type of committee structure? Who's going to do the process? And folks, that's a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are relatively elementary, but I believe are very important. And one of the most important parts as you develop your process is you lay your ground rules up front for everybody, and you stick by it. or change it unless they necessarily need to be changed. And that would be the number one choice you have to make, or decision you have to make. Are you gonna do it, or are you gonna hire somebody? That's the basic, it's two options that you have. The second decision you need to make is this process going to be totally confidential? And I have to debate this occasionally. In North Carolina, when you run an ad for your manager, regardless of how you run it, that resume or application that you receive is protected by North Carolina state statute as confidential personnel record, not to be shown to anyone other than you. Okay, it's a protected confidential record. So when you add other layers of people involved in the process, there are other processes you have to do to get the authority and approval from those candidates to do that. Okay? Any questions about that? And then lastly, who is going to assist you? Let me just assume that for right now, this board decides that you are going to do the recruitment yourself. There's a significant amount of administrative work associated with this. And you would need, if you're going to do it, you would need to identify the individual that would be responsible to you with this administrative detail. And we'll get into examples of what that is. But you'll have to establish an ad, run an ad, put in all the advertisements, and post it where it's going to be posted. You've got to collect resumes. You've got to send letters to those candidates. You've got to send other correspondence back and forth to those candidates. You've got to schedule meetings and all of those things. It's a significant amount of administrative detail. It's very manageable, but you need to understand the confidentiality of it and who you assign to do that. It has to, if it's staff, it's somebody that is in a confidential role. Questions about that? I understand. Okay. The mayor, what does this body, do you have any thoughts about what you're going to do? You're going to do it yourself or hire a consultant? And y'all talked about that at all.
We haven't really talked about that. And I, don't know the feelings of the board. Does anyone have any strong feelings about this as far as?
I do. I would like for us to do the process so we will know who we're talking to and about.
Is there any other thoughts on this? So is that the general consensus, everybody just wants to do the hiring ourselves? Mr. Bellflowers?
No, you don't have to take an action. I'm just
I'm
trying
trying to get some
to
input
determine
here. Yeah.
where my presentation is going to go from here. So if you haven't decided, or you don't need to do it now, I'm going to talk to you under the assumption that you're doing it yourselves.
That would be my thought would be that
If
this
you
board
later
probably would
decide
be.
you want to hire a consultant after hearing all of this, I will have wasted approximately 40 minutes of your time of the things that the consultant would do for you
Right.
if I weren't doing this.
Right.
Okay? So that's the main reason I'm asking the question. Mayor, this is y'all's process. You can do with it whatever you want. You can construct it, you can layer it, you can add as much to it, take as much away from it as you choose to do. And when I say your process, I mean the entire board. I'm not here to tell you what to do. One encouragement I would strongly make to you, not to assign committee assignments to the recruit. Everybody, it works best when everybody's involved. Right. I can just tell you, I've been doing this a long time, it works best when the whole board's involved. And so bearing that in mind, there's a few preachy things that I usually go through before we get into the details to it. I've already said this, how important I think it is the decision of hiring your manager. Your manager is actually your ambassador to your community. But it affects not just you and the manager. This decision affects every person, every in the town, every citizen, and every employee. Because all the employees report to the manager. So that's an important decision you're making on their behalf. Of course, the decision, the working relationship with you, you're the policy arm of the town. You adopt the policies, and the manager's job is to go implement those policies in accordance with what you want done. So it's a very important decision for you and your working relationship and what you want to do for your constituents. And then again, as an ambassador, as I told you, to your community. All of these things will work themselves out as we talk through this in personality and skills and abilities and all that stuff. And we'll talk about how to focus on those. But just remember, you're going to recruit. You want to be as professional as you possibly can going through this process, because you're going after an applicant pool that is thin and highly sought after. So the way that you present yourselves in the town of Hope Mills could very well be a deciding factor whether a candidate wants to come to work for you or go somewhere else. Okay? I may say that again, not that I think you forget it, I just think it's important. Okay. All right. Now, if I were to ask you, Mayor, have you guys talked about, or if I ask you this individually, do each of you have some idea of a special skill set or ability that the next city manager would have for the town of Hope Mills? I imagine you each have your own individual thoughts of what you think would make a good manager. But have you talked about it collectively as a group?
This is our first opportunity to have those conversations.
Okay. Then what I would suggest would be one of your first meetings is to do what I call building a profile for your candidate. And that's going to be very simple. You can make it as complicated as you want, and you can make it as simple as you want. One way it works is for each of you to bring to the table, when you schedule a meeting, 3 or 4 attributes that you were looking for in the next candidate. And just list them, each person list their attributes on the list. But I can tell you that person doesn't exist to meet all those attributes that you individually list. They don't exist. So then you go through the list and all determine collectively which ones are the most important for you in your next candidate. Okay? And that will be added to your final list or profile, if you will. Okay? And that's an important document. And that's an open work session you have to do that. It's not confidential or closed session. And I'm often asked about, well, what can the public offer input for? Well, this would be the opportunity for the public to give you input on what they're looking for in your manager, not participate in the process, give you the information they would like the next manager candidate to bring to the table. Not help you make the selection, give you what they want. Okay? Sometimes do that in this meeting, some don't. You talk to your constituents, you know how the best way to communicate. Okay? I'm not getting too fuzzy for you.
You're on the mark.
Okay, so once you develop that profile, I didn't say this, if you go to the top of the next page, I've just got some things listed on there, page 2, that are pretty basic criteria for the skill sets and abilities. For some of you need to build this profile based on what the town's needs are. Those change periodically. And sometimes the skill set to accomplish those needs change along with that. So Your most immediate and short-term needs probably are high priority, and then the longer-term things come down the line there. But remember, this is a profile, it's a guide. And one thing that won't be on here, and we'll talk about it a little later on, is personality. Because that's one of the most important components of being able to get along with personality. You get the most skillful academician in the world, but if their personality clashes with the board, it won't work. It just won't. History has proven that over and over and over again. So hopefully we can build in some ways going forward to help you determine how that person might think and how they might react and respond and get along with you and your employees and your citizens. Okay? So you take your profile that you developed, and that is your roadmap going forward. This is the instrument that you need to recruit your manager. Okay? So when you build this profile, I would encourage you to avoid using absolute statements like the candidate must have a master's in 10 years experience. It is required that they have this. Don't use absolutes, because every time you use an absolute word like that, you eliminate somebody. And you may very well eliminate the best candidate. Okay? And sometimes experience outweighs all of those other factors. Now, so you put your profile together like you wanted, and then you get ready for your recruitment. And there I'm often asked, how long is this going to take? And typically, it takes about 6 months. Now, my only word of advice is take as long as you need to get the right manager. Even if you have to throw it out and start all over again, take as long as you need to get the right person. It is so much better to put that time in up front and have to deal with it badly after the fact. So that would be my only point of encouragement. The reason it takes 6 months is you do your ad, and you send it to all the periodicals or wherever you want to do your recruitment, and it's going to go down and work. I mean, everywhere you send it's on the internet. And that takes a couple of months for all of that to get to everywhere it needs to go to. Then you start getting your resumes in. Then you have these steps you go to evaluate the resumes. Then you get into another step in the process. And that takes some time. Then you get into the interviewing stages of the process. And all of that takes time, especially when you're doing elected body, and some of you are working full time and you have to have special times off to do this. So it's a timely process. But if you get the candidate and they are already employed somewhere, they've got to work a notice in compliance with their contract, that could be a month, could be 2. So do the math, it's 6 months pretty quick.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir, I please do.
What is the average amount of weeks that an ad would be posted? For example, we're looking at 6 weeks, 7 weeks?
Good question. What I would encourage you to do, and some people don't, they take exception to my position in this, but I encourage you to just craft your ad wherever you put it, position open to fills. Don't put it. Now, if you want responses, please send resume by so and so and so and so. Put a date.
Okay.
A month is gracious plenty. I said 2 months, but a month is because everything is going viral. I mean, it's plenty of time. You just need to give them the avenues of doing it online. I don't know, y'all have online applications or whatever the process you're going to do with that. But I think a month is ample time. And it is okay to put a deadline on that. But I will not put a deadline on job must be, on the cutoff of taking applications. And here's why. If you put a cutoff date, it's a hard and fast date, and you don't get, 2 or 3 days later, you get a different applicant that could be very well head and shoulders above anybody else you've already got. They didn't make the cutoff date, you can't accept that application. Okay? You need to re-advertise and open it back up. Whereas if you leave it open to field, you're not boxed into that corner. Does that make any sense at all?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, thank you.
Okay. And while we're talking about what the norms are, I hate to do this, but if I don't, somebody always asks. And that's salary. And right now, well, every year the league does a salary survey for our members every year. And each year we get about 50 or 60% participation from all our members, and it switches around. But the last survey, and we only break our surveys down by one pocket, by one group, and that's population. We don't take anything into consideration other than the group in the population group. No consideration for beach communities or mountain communities or anything else. It's just population. So the average salary for a town of your size, and last year in North Carolina was a little over $130,000. Okay. So what does that mean? That means that's what the average was. That's all that really means. You can compare yourselves to whoever you want to compare to. And the league has the data of the towns that participated. So if you want to boil that down and look at particular communities, 2 factors will determine what you pay the next manager. One of them is the market. And we already know right now it looks like it's a seller's market pretty good. And the other thing is what you require. The more that you require of the manager in the way of education, experience, and skills, the more you typically have to pay. It's just like going to the car lot. The longer that sticker is for all those little things on it, the more that car costs. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the basics, steps 1 to 10, of how to go about this process. If that's okay. And again, it's elementary, and it's boring, so please bear with me and interrupt me anytime you have a question and take me somewhere else. But at the top of page 4, those are some primary things, places that you'll want to consider doing your recruitment and placing your ad. I will tell you that the last one on there, statewide newspaper, and I only put it on there because I pretty much have to. But I will tell you boldly that that is the biggest waste of your money you'll ever do, is to advertise for a town manager on a statewide newspaper. Managers don't go to want ads in the newspaper looking for their job ads. They go to their professional periodicals and websites, of course. So if you do any of those top 3, you're going to hit everywhere pretty much you need to hit to find the candidates you're looking for. And then I have on there local newspaper. And I'm often looked at cross-eyed about that, but I don't know what do you have Hope Mills paper or y'all?
Fairbourne.
Just have a vehicle throw.
So I don't know, do they cover your newspaper?
They cover some stuff.
Still wouldn't hurt on the ad. And here's why. There are many transit in our society today that are moving in and out every day, and we don't know who they are, where they're from. And we like to think we live in a small town in the South, and we know everybody, we know all the neighbors, and who's with. We don't. Especially in your situation when they was in the paper. And the transit community that comes to Fort Bragg. It's highly conceivable that a manager has retired from Virginia or somewhere and moved to this area. There's no interest in becoming a town manager, but if they've already retired from another state, they can start another career here. And we see it more often than you might think for. And just by seeing that local thing, they know it's here and they would not have done it because they're not looking at their professional periodicals for their job. That makes any sense. But another reason I encourage that in most towns is the media is going to want to know what you're doing. And they'll find out in your meetings that you're recruiting and that sort of stuff. I encourage you to work with local media to tell them what to do. Not to violate any confidentiality at all, but just say, okay, we're recruiting, we've opened it up, and we're going to, when the resumes come, we had 50 applicants, we had 30, we had 5, whatever it is, and we're going to narrow it down, and we hope to do this by this period. Just keep the citizens aware of what you're doing. Because I certainly don't believe it happens here, but in my community, if you don't keep the citizens aware of what you're doing, they make it up. And then they go to McDonald's and Hardee's and the coffee pots and all that, and they tell their version of the news. And next time, it's all over everywhere wrong.
No.
Yeah, and so,
Say it doesn't happen.
Are you in this town?
so I try to do this in an effort to head that off. And they work for you and they not. That's a thought I have.
I'm done.
Okay, so let's move on. We're gonna assume now we've got the ad and we've run an ad. Now, remember, one of the first things you gotta do is decide who's gonna be the recipient of that information. You get the administrative assistant if you live to the board. You get the clerk, whoever you want it to be. But one person and one person only. Okay. And as we go through these steps, I'm going through and forget to say half of it, but please don't misunderstand why I'm saying this, but every member should get the same information at the same time. Okay? And let me go through some examples. So you use your profile, you build your ads, you run your ads, and the resumes are starting to come in. Now you can say, respond by such and such a date. It's okay. But if you're getting ahead of response, you may want to go ahead and start looking at some of them earlier. But whatever you choose to do, set a time for each one of you to get those resumes. Either electronically, as long as it's protected, or hard copy, or whatever. What will cause a problem if one person runs by and says, hey, I can't come to the meeting next week, let me have those now. Don't do that. Everybody get the same thing at the same time. Sounds so basic, but I promise you it can head off some real issues down the road. I promise you it will if you do it that way.
Madam Mayor, I asked a question. I've seen some people do it 2 ways. I've seen folks do it the way you're talking about is they come in and the group gets together and looks at them. And then I've seen it done the other way where they wait until
It's all
it's all done and then they're all shared at the same time.
And the only advantage of doing it earlier is if it's a high volume.
Yeah.
Given the competitive nature right now, I'm not sure that a worthy goal. I think just doing it all at one time.
That's
is
kind of where I was
probably-
going to. Okay.
But the main thing is everybody get it at the same time. I can't tell you how many fights I've seen over, well, why did he get to come and get it the day before me? And then, it just. So, the first thing is your administrative person receives the applicant, needs to send a letter to every applicant acknowledging receipt of their application. That's all, just a simple form vote, thanking them for their application. That's all that. Remember, the more professional you can conduct yourselves in this process, the better you will work to the candidate. So that's a very simple first step. Okay? Then you comprise all the resumes. If you want to make hard copies and give them to everybody, or if you want to send it to them electronically, how you choose to do it. If y'all want to come into a room and look at them, I would take mine home and do it while I'm drinking my coffee and spend some time reading through it. Because here's what you do. Remember that profile we talked about? You That's your measuring stick. So you take your profile and you get this applicant, this resume, and you measure the applicant by what you have on your profile. And if that applicant doesn't have anything that you have on your profile, why are you going to spend any more time with it? You put it over here as thank you but no thank you. And then those that meet or close to meet the things that you're looking for, the positives, you bring those in as positive. And you come together then as a group and go over what you decided. And I promise you, if you use the profile as your measuring stick to measure the candidates by, you will be closer together than you are far apart. There are always outliers, always have been, always will. But in the general rule, you will be together on who the candidates are that you want to pursue with. Okay? Makes sense? And then the ones that all of you have decided you don't have any further interest in, then the administrative person sends them a letter thanking them again, but they're no longer going to be, pursued in this process. So they can move on with their life and do whatever it is they need to do somewhere else. Okay. Now, the next step is the ones that you like. There's probably going to be a few more in there that you want to get too involved in up front. So I would suggest that you would do something, and this is where your handouts are coming. Those 6 or 8 or however it is that you have, send them, each one of them by mail, what I call a supplemental questionnaire. And it's a sample. You first get handout there as a questionnaire. Pick 2 or 3, not too many, 2, 3, 4 questions that are relevant to the town code meals that are relevant to you, and send them to the candidate. Give them a specific period of time to respond to those questions and get them back to you in writing. And a limited amount of space, whatever you think is reasonable space to answer the question, page and a half page, 2 page, whatever. And I think you'll find that useful when you get that information back. So each one of them sends back their supplemental stuff. And it's okay when you send it to send the town application, or if they didn't fill it out online, have them fill out a town application form for other reasons, not just the resume. And you can send them any other information about the town you want to know, especially if you ask them a question about finance or something that they might need some information on before they respond. You might want to put that in the packet. When you get all that information, everybody gets the same thing again at the same time. You sit down and you evaluate how well you think they responded to the questions. And I'm telling you, it sounds frivolous, but you will learn a lot, I think, from their knowledge base on how articulate, how concise that they are in responding to your question. If it's a question that doesn't take but a half a page to answer specifically and precisely, and they write you 3 pages, and you've said 1, it tells you something. And if it's something that you need a little more information on, they need to be a little more articulate, and they had 3 sentences, that tells you something. But you'll be surprised how much you will learn from them in the specifics of responding to your directives. That's one thing we'll make sure to do. Did they respond to your directives? And I just tell you everything they want you to hear. Okay. So once you get to that level and you screen out those people, now's the time that you want to stop and just do a little bit of reference checking before you waste a lot more time. And remember the application thing we talked about. There's a couple of reasons you want that application, but there's going to be work-related information on that application that you will not get in the resume. And you can use that in reference checking. It's also going to be a signature line on there that everything they've submitted to you is positive and true and accurate. If you find out at any point in time that's not the case, they've already signed it saying goodbye. And they also sign a document authorizing you to check the references. So you don't have to give a specific authorization on every single one reference you check. Okay? So I think it's much more beneficial to get them to go through the step. Okay. Now, I will tell you, it is very difficult for a board, a group, to do reference to. It's kind of a one-man show, a one-person show. And you can appoint a board member, you can appoint your town attorney, you can appoint whoever you choose to appoint within the confidentiality group in this process to do the reference check. And I put a page in here. There's more questions that when you get checking references of things you should not do than those things you should not ask. So I put a laundry list of those in there for you to look at. But one person can get pretty proficient in doing this. They can build a pretty good system into asking questions or leading and going to the next question and finding out the supervisor that you failed to put on your rep, those types of things. And then that individual can report all of it back to the board, everything that they learned. It's conceivable that you're going to lose a candidate once you do the reference check. It's highly conceivable that you'll lose a candidate when you do the reference check. But once you've done that piece, then you're down to a really finite group that you all are interested in, you've all agreed upon that you want to talk to, and passed your sniff test so far, and they've, got good references. So here's a point in time in the step that you would want to bring them in, or you would want to physically interview them some way, either electronically, for first interview, just Zoom meetings, ever how you want to do it. There's all kind of technology now that you can do that. And if you want to have one round of interviews electronically, for example, and you may eliminate somebody that you don't want to bring that person from whatever, you're going to get a lot of, you will get out-of-state applicants. Whether any of them make it to your cut or not, I don't know, but you'll get out-of-state applicants. So you can do that and save the expense of flying somebody in here, put them up in a hotel and that sort of thing for the first round finish. Okay. And everything I've told you, I haven't mentioned it, but there are questions, there are interview questions, there's some of everything in here that I'm talking about in the back of that packet for you to consider. But just use things that are important for both meetings. This is your process, you build it in the way you want to. Now, when you do the interviews, and you get to the point that you are going to narrow that group down to just a couple, 2 or 3, maybe 4, that you want to physically meet in person and have an interview. You will want to do that. You will not want to make a hiring decision based on a Zoom meeting. When you bring that candidate in, I recommend that you send a letter from the mayor, inviting them for the interview. Put a list of, put an itinerary in the letter of what's going to happen while they're here, who they're going to see. That's an important piece, who they're going to see. But if they're just going to see the board, that's fine. But if you're going to take them out and introduce them to people, people will know who they are. They need to know that so they can decide either whether to come or not, or more than likely they can decide to tell their mayor that they're going somewhere else for an interview, just in case you hear that. That's probably what will happen. But you need to give them that opportunity to do it. Don't surprise them with that violation of personnel rules, okay? So when you do your interviews, folks, find somewhere that's conducive to doing that without any kind of interruptions, without sirens going off, people calling in and turning your cell phones off and all that. And allow at least 2 hours for every interview. at least 2 hours. And then a big break. I've seen boards try to run 5 candidates through the day. You cannot do it right. Just can't. Allow ample time. It will be focused interview. You will have predetermined questions, hopefully. And I go so far there to say that the same person asks the same question each time. And I'm a prime example of why that's a good idea. I was helping with an interview process, and we just randomly asked the questions. They didn't have assigned questions. And this one candidate, some green deal type, emphasis in the parks director was very interested in that, and they just kept leading and asking deeper and deeper questions about that to that individual. And the next time around, I asked that question. It just came up. And I don't know what they said. I didn't care. It wasn't important. Let's move on to the next question. But that's not a fair comparison of the level of skills between those 2 candidates. There's no way to get the fair analysis when the questioning is that broad and different. So if you ask those type of questions of a candidate, do the same thing for each candidate until you get to the place that you're satisfied. That makes sense.
And just looking at your handouts, personally, I like the fact that you've given us some suggestions and we could assign questions, but I also like the way you're evaluating the responses of the interview. I think this is in other words, this takes away some of the personal comments, because here you've got a system of how to do it. But I just want to comment on page 13. This is something that I think we've missed out on other times that we've interviewed, and that is the setting up a schedule like this so that they can meet those other people, and that gives the town people, finance director, PR, that gives them an opportunity to have some input, even though it might just be that feeling of that introduction. So I like this this outline of how to do the business.
That, Mayor, that's the reason I put it in there. You build it like you want it. But if you choose to do that, you must send them that letter and let them know that that's what they want to do.
I think, and see, this, by the time they get to that interview time, they're more comfortable because they've had exposure to the town, and they might, by the time they finish this up, they might say, well, hey, I'm going home. I'm not going to go through that interview. But I think the good thing is you give them that comfort zone is going to be so much better because you give them an opportunity to see the town itself.
I'm going to take it to a different level in there, if you like that part. When you bring these folks in, of course, if they're coming in from out of town, you need to give them overnight accommodation, whatever you need. I would encourage, if possible, a way to do this is if they have family that they want to bring, the family stays with them. And I would go so far as if it is appropriate, and you can determine that it's appropriate, they have family members you can send, or you can provide for a gender-specific person to show that person, the family around town, your schools, your hospitals, all, this is your Chamber of Commerce time. Remember that. And because they don't find it out. And it's better if you help them. They don't have already looked at it on the internet. They don't be, looking at everything in hoping. But they can now have a person to talk to them about it and show it. If they're willing to do that, you can make them know. Remember, you're competing. And a lot of places won't do that, especially if they're using consultants. Okay?
Someone to act as a town ambassador
Exactly.
works out very well.
Exactly. But maintain the confidentiality level as far as you can. Okay? Now, in the interview, we've all, so far, here's what we've done. We've gotten resumes. We don't know who voted. They may have hired somebody to do this. We've gotten some responses to a questionnaire that we mailed to them. But they may have had assistance in entry. We don't know that. All we know is what we had. And we evaluated that. And we've had an oral interview. And we like the way they talk. That's pretty much what you get out of an oral interview. So I will encourage you to make this a learning experience for you. Right now, this is the one shot you've got, is to glean any information you can as to how that person is going to function in your team. So in your interview process, allow time at the end. And you can put some oral questions in it as well, but allow time at the end for some practical application with a candidate. And what I mean, have a private space that they can go to with a computer. Give them something that's real, everyday life of a manager that's bordering on a crisis situation, if you will. And tell them they've got a specific amount of time to go respond to that. They don't have time for assistance. They don't have time to Google anything. They got to respond. And then you will see, you'll be a closer snapshot of what they're really like in the real world, having to deal with real life situations. Try to make that as creative as you can. Whatever you do, if you choose to know any of that, please add some HR-related issues in your questions and your practical application. The hardest job of any manager, and I don't care who it is, from a nuclear physicist down to a fire department chief. And I think we have a chief in the back, and I believe he will attest to it if asked. The hardest job of any manager is managing people. I don't care who you are. The hardest part of the job is managing people. And this is your chance to find out, or try to find out, what kind of manager of people this individual might be. And so the scenarios you give him or her, and the way they respond to that, they tell you, well, that's not the way we would want a manager to perform and pay bills, or it may show you things that you hadn't thought about. So, wow, that's pretty creative, but it's a good idea to do about it. I strongly encourage you to put some HR-related issues in your process. How far off, Jim?
Right on it, sir.
And make them, and you got a fire chief, y'all got, is that a paid part? You got a fire chief, police, you guarantee if you got issues, or had issues, one of those two chiefs know what it was about and can give you some scenarios of how it worked out and what you could have done. Is that fair, chief?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, once you've completed all of your interview processes, Mayor's already alluded to it, after you finished every candidate, before you go to another candidate, you fill out your evaluation form. I put some sample forms, so you don't have to go, you create your own. Everything I got is just a sample. But it's important to do that at the end of every interview. Don't put it off until the end of the day. You do it right then while it's fresh on your mind. And this is an important document to come back with when you get ready to talk about your candidate. Because one of you may evaluate a candidate really high in one area, and somebody else evaluate them really low in that same area. Why? What did you hear different? And if you don't commit it to writing on the front end early, you'll forget about it. And so now's the time for you two to talk about what differences that you hear or see that brought you to two different conclusions like that. It's very conceivable that somebody misunderstood something they said, and there's time to get it clarified. Or it's conceivable that you might want to follow up with that person on that same area again, just to see if you're both in line. So, but it's a strong tool to help you understand why you're making the decisions you make. Okay. So once you've gotten to that point, you identifying a candidate that you were interested in pursuing as the candidate, please stop right where you are and don't do anything else until you have a completed background investigation. And I mean a complete background investigation to include financial, everything, criminal, driving record, everything. If he's working in 3 states, spend the money and get it done in each state. And unless it's changed, have it run through the FBI as well. Because the last time I was involved with this, none of the state databases and the FBI databases talk to each other. And I know of a person that was hired for a municipality who had been arrested by the FBI, who had been tried in a federal court and had been sentenced to federal penitentiary and did not have a blemish on his name in the state of North Carolina anywhere. So it's just a few dollars to have that FBI check done, okay? And there are companies out there that can do this well. I mean, this is what they do. And they're very thorough, they're very prompt, and they turn around quickly, and they're reasonably inexpensive. And I can provide you that information later on if you get to that point in the workshop. Okay, but that's an important piece. Don't do anything else until you get that background back. The worst thing in the world can happen is you go through this process and not do this. You hire a manager. And you've told your community what a great person this is and how we've done our due diligence. And 6 months later, you come up with unpaid income tax until you use an IRS system. So, do your due diligence on this piece is very important. Okay? And once that's done there, it's a couple of steps, and I'm not trying to build permanent employment for attorneys, but I would, you agree who you want to hire, the offer you want to make, the salary and that sort of stuff, and authorize the mayor to make a phone call to the person and talk to them verbally. And there may be some exchanges that need to be made. They may say, well, yeah, can you, instead of giving me a phone allowance, can you do this? Or instead of giving me a car, I don't want a car, can you give me a car allowance? Or I need you to pay for my membership into the ICMA, whatever, those little negotiating points. Then you can come back to the board, negotiate and share that, and you can say, okay, yeah, that's fine, or no, we're not gonna do that. But get that done verbally. And when you put your final offer out, please have it done in writing and have your town attorney draft the letter. Have your town attorney draft the letter. Because if it's going to be a point of contention, it's going to fall back to this letter. You're going to have a contract. I'm going to tell you that, but nobody's going to come to Hope Hills in 2021 without asking for a contract. And so you got legal parameters around the contract that you want your town attorney to review for you. Okay? And the offer letter is just as an important piece of that legal document from my perspective. And I'm not a lawyer, by the way, I'm just a one person. But that's where the legal issues start if you get something in the offer letter that you didn't follow up right with in the contract. And those two come into conflict with each other. Okay? So please get your town attorney. I'm not promoting town attorneys. I happen to know Mr. Hartwell, and that's one of the best firms you can get for that type of stuff. They know HR really well.
We're gonna keep you there.
So with that, I'll open myself up to any questions that you might have, anything I didn't talk about, or you wish to have.
Any questions you want to ask?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
what's one of the biggest challenges to do the process yourself that you see? Now, I know there's multiple processes.
The biggest challenge
What's the
in
biggest
doing this collectively is time.
Right.
And, being able to get together as a group at the same time. And it does require commitment. And the best, as I say to my folks, you set a plan and then you work the plan. You set a schedule and you work your schedule. And you set it early enough that people can, calendar around what you're trying to do and just Everybody just has to do their part to be there. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
And it does require even some reading and screening but I'll be honest with you. I think when you do it as a group, you get information about the person, each of you get the same information, you read it, and when you do it with a consultant, which I'm not criticizing, I mean, they do a good job, that's no ill will there. But they do some of that up front for you. And in small towns, like what we see sometimes, that somebody will call the mail, my son-in-law applied for that, and he didn't even get an interview. Y'all didn't even talk to him, and the consultant had done the screening and got that out. And so you're having to take the hits for that, and you didn't know about it. It stops, sometimes it will eliminate the questioning amongst yourselves of why one person, got favorable view over another person when you've all done it together. But time is the biggest.
That's what I see, the main difference between the board, between us doing it and a consultant doing it, is time.
Yeah, because the consultant, if you hire one of the first things they're gonna do is this meeting to build a profile. That's gonna be the first thing they're gonna do is meet with y'all and build a profile. And then they'll do the recruitment and screening, but it's gonna be by your criteria. And then they get to the candidate's final list and you still interview and y'all still go through that part and make the final decision, so.
That and the timeline, establishing the timeline throughout the processes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's conceivable that the consultant can make it go faster if all the stars line up just right. But there's no foregone conclusion that they can.
Well, it's pros and cons for both.
For both, absolutely. And they're good at what they do. I'm not, discrediting that at all. And price wise, I don't know, probably in the 20 to 30,000 range.
About right.
Well, I'm looking at if we narrow it down, say to 5, let's say that's the number. Then I can see with the way if you look at your schedule for the interview day, then the board itself would not be tied up until the end of the day. So there would be a lot in time and we wouldn't have to necessarily do it every day of the week. I think it's possible with administrative help for doing the legwork, getting the ad out, getting all that. I think we can bring back the criteria and go over that, say, prior to a board meeting. And then have it so that the profile we would establish and then have that administrative help to get us to the next level. But I believe with having steps here and to follow this rule, I believe we would probably, as a board and for our general public, we would probably do better than having a consultant, because I think we catch hits right now because of the amount of money we're spending on consultants for different things.
Right.
So that's where I'm thinking, everybody here has worked in some type of professional realm. And I just believe, we would be able to know, I'm speaking for all of them, but I believe they would be able to do the interview and make a good selection based on the material you've got here.
Well, I'm not discouraging you,
Yeah.
consultants. I'm just laying the options out for you to choose.
Well, and I'm just speaking
And
for
they do it
myself
right, it's wasting
personally.
money.
Yeah.
Y'all, remember one thing, if you do it yourselves, and you're going through this whole process, and it only takes one. If it's the right one, it only has to be one candidate, if it's the right candidate. Okay? Don't worry about, we didn't get 50 applications. Don't worry about it if you got the right applications. It only takes one to do it right. And if you get through the end of this process, and it seems so frustrated that nobody's surfaced, start again. Take as long as you need to do it right. Not
I've been
just
there.
do it to fill the time slot.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Been there, do it,
Much
start
happier.
over. Mhm. Don't settle.
No,
I've been there, probably Mayor Pro Tem has too. Don't settle, not at all.
Well, Mayor,
Yes, sir.
is this at a time that we want to select a person to send out the letters and things like that to the board?
Oh, probably once we come up with a profile in our timeline, then we can, work either with, town clerk or assistant town clerk. I'm thinking that would be probably our best bet to
That's your decision.
yeah, use one of those,
That was my thought.
yeah, one of those administrative positions. Uh-huh.
I would just like to say, I'm gonna take some time and really go through this packet, and I appreciate your presentation. I believe that you've given us the tools. We just need to take parts of this tool and make sure that we use it efficiently. But I think that you've given us some great tools to get us started and to carry us through the process.
Thank you, I hope so.
Oh, you have.
I know it's boring, and, you know, but it is what it is, and it's important. It really, I can't say that enough. This is the most important decision you probably make, unless something major happens in the town.
My questions wasn't one way or the other. It was just
I
trying
know.
to go to the
I
middle.
oftentimes have to guard myself to make sure I wasn't carrying it one way or the other.
Yeah.
Standing in the road.
Yeah.
Sometimes I let my personal preferences get in the way of just providing information. So,
And I liked what you said about references. I was just a hiring manager recently. Called a reference about an individual, and 2 days later, individual withdrew. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It works
So I know what happens. I just went through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the reference piece, and I read off the record, but I was checking the reference on the man one day, and I called this guy that he had worked for, and I told him what I was doing. He said, "Sir, if you can get that guy to work for you, you'll be a lucky man." Oh,
That's good.
He said, "No, listen to me. If you can get that guy to work for you, you'll be a lucky man."
Yeah. You gotta offer him something.
So,
You got the ante up to get him.
any other questions there?
I don't have any, but as we go through this process, and I guess any steps along the way, you'll be there if we need,
I'm there
guidance.
anytime. I work for you,
okay?
okay?
That's
I
fair
work for
enough.
the manager, I work for you.
That's fair enough.
Okay. Thank y'all so much, and I
Thank
wish you
you.
the best of luck. I really do. Sometimes you throw the net out, and you don't bring in many, throw it out again before you go any further. Just, get as many in as you think you can. Keep the faith, folks. We'll be all right.
Okay, thank you so
Thank
much.
you for coming in, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Be careful on the way home.
Thank you.
Don't go through the dirt next door.
Yeah, well, when I turned in, I had to do a quick back end. I hope I don't get towed. I parked at the fire department.
Should be okay.
Talk to the chief. he
Yeah,
might get it.
the chief over here, he can help you out.
Everybody locked me up.
Thank you for
Go ahead
your
and go.
time. I appreciate you coming in.
You don't need to throw that work on you.
I'd like to make a motion to conduct a closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11-86 to discuss personnel matters.
I have a motion, to have a second. I have a motion, second, all in favor, signify by raising your right hand. We will go to the front conference room. Do I need to take the computer with him, Mr. Hartside?
I honestly don't know.
Okay, so if you want to, we can, I asked Ms. Starling, but we'll go, probably work on some of this other information while we're waiting for the interview to get here. Okay, we're going to go to closed session. We're going to go to the front, conference room at this time.
All right.